completely. The Jerome Biblical Commentary, sponsored by the Roman Catholic Church, discusses the problem more fully in its New Testament section. Page 307. Its commentary on Romans is attributed to Joseph A. Fitzmyer, S.J., Society of Jesus, that is, the Jesuit order. He writes, the meaning of the phrase FO is much disputed, on the grounds of which, an interpretation that understands death as the antecedent. But this is hard to reconcile with Rom. 5:21, 6:23, where death is the result of sin, not its source. Moreover, this interpretation seems to make Paul say that death spread to all men on condition that they would sin after its entry. Does he mean this? In view of this diversity of opinion, the best meaning is still because, inasmuch as a difficulty often found with it is that it seems to make Paul say in 5:12 CD something contradictory to what he says in 12 AB. In the beginning of the verse, sin and death are ascribed to Adam. Now death seems to be due to man's deeds. So Fitzmyer finds refuge in this diversity of opinion to agree with the incorrect majority. He claims that to take FO literally would contradict Rom. 6:23, but he presents no solution to the apparent contradiction. He has no answer to the apparent contradiction, so he is forced to leave it intact instead of trying to reconcile the two passages. The problem is actually that the translators did not understand the distinction between the two deaths. To those who understand Paul, it is clear that in Romans 5:12 he was writing about the effects of Adam's sin upon us, but in Romans 6:23 he was writing about the effects of our own sin. Both Rotherham and Young defer to the King James Version, saying for that all sinned. This phrase carries the same meaning as because and is just as wrong, but for that is more obscure. It seems that they were hoping to muddy the water, hoping no one would see the issue clearly. The Concordant Version is a literal translation that reads, 12 therefore, as through one man sin entered into the world, and through sin death, and thus death passed through into all mankind, on which all sinned. The CVS translators understood what Paul was teaching and how he was laying foundations for what he was about to write in the rest of the chapter. Conversely, it seems clear that the other translators refused to translate FOs on which, because they knew the theological implications of this and refused to believe Paul's teaching. If they admitted what Paul was clearly saying, they would be forced to follow Paul's logic to its conclusion. So they felt it was better to deny the plain reading of Romans 5:12 in order to escape Paul's conclusions in the rest of the chapter. This is one of the most egregious examples of deliberate mistranslation designed to make Paul agree with the incorrect views of the translators.
Wow.
Paul's illustration clarifies his teaching in the next two verses. Paul proves his point that the first death, brought to us by Adam's sin, is the cause of our own weakness and sin. 13 For until the law, sin was in the world, but sin is not imputed when there is no law. 14 Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam until Moses, even over those who had not sinned in the likeness of the offense of Adam, who is a type of him who was to come. From Adam to Moses the law was in existence in the mind of God, but it had not yet been legislated to man in a formal manner. When the law was finally given to Moses, the Israelites took an oath of obedience, which obligated them legally to abide by its moral code. Paul uses this as a prophetic illustration to show the effects of Adam's sin prior to the giving of the law. Men were mortal during the time period, even though the law had not yet been given through Moses. But sin is not imputed when there is no law, Paul says. So by what law did men die prior to Moses? How could the law judge men for their personal sins when it had not yet been revealed to them? From Paul's perspective, men died on account of Adam's sin, not on account of their own sin. The logic of verses 13 and 14 tell us exactly what Paul meant in verse 12. The dirty little secret is that these translators did not want to attribute our mortality to Adam, probably because they thought it would be unjust of God to make us pay for sins that we had not personally committed ourselves. Yet Paul proves his point by citing all who died between Adam and Moses. The translators did not understand that mortality came through Adam, not through each person's own sin.
Amen.
Hence, when Paul says later, the wages of sin is death, Rom. 6:23, he was not talking about the mortality we received from Adam, but the penalty for our own personal sins, which is the second death.
The second death.
Not comprehending this distinction led to the mistranslations in nearly every modern Bible, as men try to explain how Paul could have made such a terrible mistake in Romans 5.
Wow. So I don't know of anybody who touches this subject so clearly. The effects of Adam's sin are universal, and the penalty for our own sins is the second death, the lake of fire.